He had waited 4 decades for this night. Maxwell Donovan, the name engraved on countless plaques, was finally stepping down. The applause was thunderous. Glasses clinked. Old colleagues lined up to share their half-sincere praises. Yet the man of the hour stood still, eyes distant. While the crowd at Riverside Plaza toasted his career, Maxwell's gaze lingered on the people who mattered most, or should have. His wife Vivian radiated elegance and charm, flashing a smile that had once felt like home, but now felt rehearsed. Their children, Natalie and Preston, played their roles flawlessly. But there was a strange script running beneath the surface. They were too present, too polite, too eager. He could feel it. The betrayal coiled like a snake under silk. He didn't need a toast to know something was off. He only needed to look at his family and remember the feeling of being hunted. Natalie leaned in first. Sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, she carried herself like a courtroom executioner. "Congratulations, Dad," she said, her voice syrupy, eyes gleaming with something venomous. Preston, always the underachiever, but skilled in sycophancy, smirked like he'd just watched someone step on a landmine. Then Vivian, the actress of this tragic play, slid the envelope across the table. "A gift," she whispered, as if betrayal were a perfume she was debuting. Maxwell opened it with hands that had handled war budgets, mergers, and secrets darker than balance sheets, divorce papers, asset transfers, pension seizures. His life, itemized and redistributed. Natalie's phone was already recording. "Your pension is ours. You get nothing," Preston added, gloating like a child with stolen candy. Maxwell smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was restraint. They thought this was the climax. It was only the cold open. For a moment, he said nothing. His mind traveled back, not to boardrooms or birthdays, but to a cabin deep in the Alps, where a younger Maxwell once learned how to kill a man without leaving a mark. Before he was the banker, he was something else, something classified. They didn't know that. They never asked. His family had always seen him as a provider, a fossil of the analog world. They had no idea he had built a web beneath them. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, safe houses, dead man's switches. As he signed each page with the Mont Blanc pen they gifted him years ago, his silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. "Understood," he said. Not forgiveness, not fear, just the quiet signal of a man who had already moved 10 steps ahead. 3 days later, the fallout began. Vivian's spa day was cut short by a frozen bank account. Preston's company car was repossessed mid-meeting. Natalie's legal firm received a surprise audit. The family's empire was cracking, and Maxwell hadn't even raised his voice. Panic settled in like mold. They had underestimated the one man who never gambled without counting cards. Maxwell hadn't disappeared. He had evolved. And everything they thought they'd won. It was bait. The truth unraveled quickly. Maxwell had suspected the affair 15 years ago. Texts, receipts, conversations overheard in whispers. Bernard Holloway, his trusted friend and family's financial advisor, had been part of the rot. Maxwell never confronted him. He studied him. He learned. Betrayal, he knew, wasn't an act of passion. It was arithmetic. It followed patterns. And Maxwell was always best at patterns, so he waited. 15 years, not for revenge, for precision. At a secret apartment under a different name, Maxwell initiated the plan. Checkmate. It wasn't revenge, it was revelation. He watched his wife attempt to log into an account that no longer existed. He saw his son's frantic calls bounce off voicemail firewalls. Natalie's legal reach crashed against impenetrable servers. Bernard tried contacting old allies only to find them burned by a slow, deliberate leak of information. Every move they made was anticipated, every exit blocked. They weren't fighting a man anymore. They were trapped in a game of chess they never knew they were playing. And Maxwell had already taken their queen. Meanwhile, Bernard received a visitor of his own, the SEC. Anonymous reports, paper trails, Offshore inconsistencies, all leading back to him. He blamed Maxwell, of course, but it didn't matter. The damage was terminal. Bernard's name became poison in the financial world. His legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. Preston's sins followed next. Maxwell had uncovered years of embezzlement. He didn't expose it all at once. He let the scent of blood hit the water. Preston's employer pounced. A public scandal. Termination. Legal proceedings. Each downfall was surgical, silent, clean. And then there was Natalie, the one who prided herself on being untouchable. To her, ethics were accessories, optional, seasonal. But Maxwell had been watching. He had documented everything. When she buried exonerating evidence to win a high-profile case, he recorded it, every detail. And when the time came, he sent it. Not to the media, but to the state bar. The blow wasn't just career-ending, it was reputation-wrecking. The kind that follows you into Google search results for the rest of your life. The family reunited, but not in celebration. Vivian's once pristine living room became a war room of panic. "He's ruining us!" Natalie hissed, pacing in circles. "This isn't just revenge, this is strategic annihilation." Preston wanted to flee. Vivian still clung to disbelief. "He's not capable of this," she muttered. That's when the doorbell rang. A courier handed them a single white envelope. Inside, a photograph of Vivian and Bernard, time-stamped 15 years ago, the night of Maxwell's 25th anniversary. Below it, a note in elegant handwriting. "You've been playing checkers your whole life. I play chess. The game has just begun." The room fell silent. This wasn't over. It was war. Desperation led them to the one man who might understand the ghost haunting their lives. Raymond Donovan. Maxwell's younger brother wasn't a banker. He had built his fortune in military contracting, far from boardrooms and bar associations. He lived behind high fences and steel doors, but when Vivian arrived at his shipyard office, he opened the door. Not out of sympathy, but curiosity. "So," he said, arms folded, "you finally realized who you were married to." She begged for help. Raymond listened silently, then dropped the hammer. He knew 15 years ago. He came to me, heartbroken. I told him to leave you. He didn't. He waited. And while you and Bernard plotted, Maxwell planned. The words hit her harder than any lawsuit. The life she thought she controlled had been orchestrated by the man she underestimated most. Raymond's voice sharpened like a blade. "You never really knew him. None of you did. Maxwell wasn't born in banking. We served together, covert units, psychological ops, field intel. He wasn't just intelligent. He was lethal with patience. You thought you were draining a deer. You were baiting a wolf." Vivian collapsed into the chair, trembling. The man she dismissed for years, mocked for his rigidity, had built a cage around them brick by digital brick. "Why didn't he act sooner?" she whispered. Raymond looked out at the harbour. "Because pain sharpens a man like nothing else. Because some wounds aren't meant to bleed. They're meant to scar." Maxwell hadn't wanted retribution. He wanted understanding. But when it never came, he turned understanding into execution. Elsewhere, Bernard Holloway sat alone in his condo, drinking himself into a blur, until he noticed something impossible. Maxwell, seated calmly across the room. "How?" Bernard stuttered, his voice breaking like wet paper. "You still use Vivian's birthday as your password," Maxwell replied, expression unreadable. He wasn't there for violence, he was there for punctuation. "You always thought you were smarter than me. But you couldn't see the one thing that mattered. I was never playing the same game." Maxwell explained the dead man's switch. The scheduled data drops. The unrelenting system of exposure set to trigger automatically unless he disabled it. "Your legacy will fall apart in slow motion. Not because I want revenge, Bernard. Because you tried to erase me. You tried to replace me." Bernard collapsed into himself, broken. Maxwell stood and left. leaving silence heavier than judgment. 2 days later, news broke. Bernard had attempted suicide. His note implicated Vivian directly. Suddenly, she was no longer the grieving wife. She was the architect of a financial conspiracy. Preston's world collapsed next. As he tried to flee to Belize, he discovered his passport had been quietly red-flagged. Airport security detained him at the gate. Natalie, once the family's iron fist, now faced iron bars. Disbarred, disgraced, denied every job she applied for. It was as if someone was watching every move she made and slamming every door before she could reach it. They weren't just losing money, they were losing identity, purpose, and power. And Maxwell wasn't even in the room. Then came the final blow. On the 1-month anniversary of Maxwell's retirement, his family received gilded invitations to what they believed was a settlement negotiation, perhaps the last chance to claw back some dignity. They arrived dressed for diplomacy. What they found was disaster. Cameras, reporters, investigators. The doors locked behind them. A projector lit the conference room, playing their sins in high definition. Embezzlement, obstruction, fraud, perjury. Each frame annotated, dated, signed. Maxwell had tipped off every major agency, supplied ironclad evidence, and choreographed their downfall as if directing a ballet. They weren't just exposed, they were disgraced, publicly, permanently, without the decency of privacy. Maxwell never appeared. Only his voice, steady as ever, spoke through a final video message. "You wanted everything I had," he began, "and for years, I gave it freely, my money, my time, my love, until the day you mistook my kindness for weakness." The room fell silent as the family listened to themselves, in secretly recorded clips, plotting his ruin. The very evidence they thought was deleted, destroyed, or forgotten had been preserved like relics in a vault. "I built my life brick by brick," Maxwell said, "and when you tried to burn it down, you forgot one thing. I built the foundation, underground." The projector clicked off. The press swarmed them like flies. 6 months passed. Vivian was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, obstruction. Preston, too arrogant to plead guilty, cracked under pressure and accepted 5 years in federal prison. Natalie, though not imprisoned, became professionally radioactive. Her name was synonymous with corruption. And Bernard? After surviving his suicide attempt, he turned state's witness in exchange for reduced sentencing, sealing the fates of everyone involved. Maxwell watched it all unfold from a private beachfront in Bali. The sun was warm, the drink was cold, and for the first time in decades, he felt light. He hadn't just won, he had survived and silenced them with their own voices. The only person who ever called him anymore was Raymond. "Sentencing's next week," his brother said over a secure line. "Are you coming back?" Maxwell looked out at the shoreline, where waves washed footprints away before they could settle. "No," he said. "I've given them enough of my life." He didn't need to see their faces again. He'd already seen what they looked like when masks fall. He didn't hate them, not anymore. But he no longer recognized them. What they took from him wasn't money or status. It was belief. And what he took from them in return was finality. As the call ended, Maxwell took one last look at the digital monitoring system he'd built. Silent watchers, deadlines, triggers. He tapped Terminate Protocol. No more backups, no more tracking, no more wait. It was done. He had told them once. Chess is about anticipating your opponent. But no one had asked the deeper question. What happens when the opponent doesn't even realize they're playing until the king is already cornered? They thought they had cornered a pawn. They hadn't seen the knight hiding in plain sight. And now the game board was empty, scorched, and silent. He walked the beach alone, the tide rising behind him. His footprints vanished with every step. It felt right. Being forgotten. Not as punishment, but as freedom. Maxwell didn't leave a note. He didn't need to. Everything had been said. Every message delivered with surgical clarity. They had. tried to write his ending, but he had rewritten the entire script. Theirs became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and barrooms. His, a ghost story, the kind that ends not with a scream, but with silence, the kind where the last man standing doesn't raise his voice. He vanishes completely, without apology, without regret. Maxwell Donovan didn't retire. He vanished. And in doing so, he taught the world the most powerful lesson of all. Betrayal has a cost, and some men don't scream when they bleed. They disappear and take everything with them.